The Missouri Department of Agriculture is dedicated to the promotion and protection of the state's agricultural industry. With more than 100,000 farms located on more than 28 million acres of farmland, the state's Department of Agriculture works to connect farmers with consumers. Next on Show Me Ag. Welcome to Show Me Ag. I'm your host, Kyle Vickers. Richard Fordyce has been not only an active Missouri farmer, but has also been an active leader in some of our top farm organizations. A couple of years ago, he took on a new role as the director of the Missouri Department of Agriculture. He represents farmers and consumers around the state as well as in foreign markets, and he helps to set policies that will guide us into the next generation of Missouri agriculture. Director, thank you for coming tonight. I know you're very busy, and we really appreciate it. Give us a little quick update on how we're doing in Missouri. It's a very busy time of year.
You know, it is, Kyle, and again, thank you for the invitation to be here. I think that if you look at the crop side of Missouri agriculture right now, we're in a lot better place than we were last year. For example, the last planting reports that we got from USDA says that soybeans are 84% planted compared to 39% last year. The corn is planted primarily. Our friends in southeast Missouri that grow cotton and rice, that crop has been in the ground for quite some time. So from crop side, we're doing well. We've seen cattle herd is increasing in size, and we've seen a little bit of a rebound in markets here on the cattle and the crop side here recently.
The crop side is amazing to me. We did a show earlier in the year with the folks from FAPRI, and their predictions were pretty bleak. But it looks like for corn and soybeans, at least, things are looking up a little bit.
You know, they are, and I think a couple of things, really three things maybe attribute to that. But it's dry in Argentina and Brazil, in a lot of those primary areas of growing corn and soybeans. We've seen our exports tick up just a little bit. China's is buying again at a little higher level, and we're seeing a little stress on the U.S. crop. So I think that's where we're seeing the strength, at least in the grain market.
Well, it's mostly a busy time of year. I noticed that today as I was driving in, every field is full of a tractor baling hay, planting, spraying, doing all kinds of things. You mentioned the beef industry a little bit. That's a big factor for Missouri. Prices are off from a couple of years ago. Numbers are growing. Tell us a little bit, and I know you've got an initiative that you're working on to improve our beef herd and the amount of income we can draw.
Right. Well, so early on in 2014, Governor Nixon came to me and he asked, what is the next play really in agriculture? And that question caught me off guard a bit. But as we worked through that, we determined that the cow-calf sector in Missouri is either number 2 or number 3 ranked in the country as far as numbers. So we thought we'd spend a little time looking at the beef industry, and we learned a lot of things. 1.8, 1.9 million calves born every year in Missouri. By the time they get to a finish weight, we've managed to retain about 70,000 of those. So a big percentage of those cattle are leaving the state. And so we looked at what are things that we could do to increase the herd, improve the herd, and put more value in our rural communities across Missouri. And so we've talked about a lot of things, and so we have started now what we're calling the beef initiative. And a lot of things are in that beef initiative. Number 1 would be to look at opportunities to feed more cattle in Missouri. That benefits a lot of segments of agriculture in the state. And we know that if we're going to do that, we need to do that in an environmentally responsible way. So we're advocating that producers would feed under covered structures. We know that you get gains, efficiency gains, feed efficiency gains, animal health improvements, and you're able to kind of keep that manure together and use that as a value on your farm. So we're advocating for that, and then of course a lot of other things that we're doing with the beef initiative.
If you can capture that, it becomes an asset rather than a liability. Absolutely. To control that waste. So how is this going to benefit Missourians generally? You mentioned only about 70,000 are retained. The rest of them go to probably Kansas, Nebraska to be fed. If we can keep those here, that means a lot of jobs.
It does. It means jobs. It means additional value. Anytime, just as an example, the year that we looked at was 2014. We were number 2 in 2014 in cattle numbers, cow-calf numbers. but we dropped to number 9 in net cash receipts. And that's because we're selling these calves out of Missouri at feeder calf weights, maybe doing some backgrounding in some cases. But again, a high percentage of those, the value is being put on in another state. They're being fed corn from another state or soybean meal or whatever it may be. We know that we can add value and we can benefit the state's economy by keeping those cattle in Missouri a little longer.
One of the things that over the years that I've really noticed is the upgrade in quality of Missouri's cattle. I was at one of the Show Me Select heifer sales down in Joplin, and wow, just phenomenal improvement in the quality of the cattle that are being offered, and that really makes a big difference as well.
It does, and again, in kind of our research, we talked to all the major packers. And there was kind of a consistent message. They said, why don't you all keep sending us those really high quality cattle out of Missouri and we'll feed them and process them, out here. I think a lot of factors attribute to that being the case. Missouri is home to over 12 breed association headquarters. National headquarters are in Missouri. So we've got a lot of seed stock producers, and I think just by the close proximity of those high quality seed stock, no matter what the breed, you see an improvement in the herds from a genetic profile, and the quality of those cattle are just better in Missouri than they are in a lot of states.
The cattle feeding industry years ago started making that move out to the high plains, but by bringing them, and I think maybe the preferred method may be the hoop buildings. Is that true?
Right.
So what are we seeing in terms of, are you finding some people willing to make that investment and willing to feed them that way?
We really are, and you make a very good point that in the 1960s and early 1970s, we fed a lot of cattle in Missouri. We fed cattle when I was a kid, and I remember that it was muddy when we put them in there, and it seemed like it was muddy when we took them out. But you mitigate a lot of those climate concerns by putting them on a solid surface under a hoop structure, and you kind of get away from some of those things that kind of drove the cattle feeding business out to the high plains.
Well, another thing that's characteristic of Missouri, more miles of rivers and streams than any place else, and too many concentrated animals can be a problem. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, again, so we know that if we're going to move forward with feeding more cattle in Missouri, we've got to do it in an environmentally sensitive or environmentally conscious way. And so if you have these cattle under hoop structure, and so we envision maybe a single producer or a small co-op, a small group of producers go together and feed those animals under a covered structure. And obviously you're able to capture that manure. We had done the calculations, a 320 head building, so 320 head of cattle going in, finished in there, run 2 turns through there in a year. Whether that's the ideal number, we don't know, but that's the number we used. The manure generated from that operation would supplement the fertilizer on 150 acres of corn. That's big.
And it could kind of match up because that corn's going to go back into the cattle.
Absolutely.
And vice versa.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All these confined animal issues have been boiling for many years here in Missouri, and as it is in other states. We're having a little controversy in our local area about poultry buildings. How do we as farmers address some of these concerns that consumers have, that citizens have about clean water, clean air, and so on?
Well, I think that, we put a lot of stock in what the Department of Natural Resources do in their permitting process. I think it's safe to say that we have learned a lot maybe in the last 3 decades. We kind of saw concentrated animal feeding operations start to come in more prevalent maybe 25, 30 years ago. We didn't know a lot about how to manage those, frankly. We didn't know how to manage the manure. We didn't know how to manage them from an environmental standpoint. Lots of strides, tons of strides forward in managing that. There's new technologies for odor control. There's new technologies for waste management. Now we're covering some lagoons, using those as an anaerobic digester, capturing the methane. We've got a big operation up in north central Missouri that's actually creating pipeline grade natural gas out of these lagoons, drastically reducing the odor. You cover the lagoon, you basically eliminate the risk of overtopping and having an accidental spill. So again, lots of strides, and I think that's the message that we need to send. You know, it's critically important for us in Missouri agriculture to continue to grow. We have to have a thriving animal agriculture segment of the industry. You know, that makes for additional markets for corn and soybean growers. Creates additional jobs, creates additional tax infrastructure for local communities. We need to be responsible, but I think in most cases we are. And again, the things that we've learned about how to manage that have come a long, long way.
I know you've got an initiative that's really trying to get farmers to sort of buy into a policy or a program that would assure some environmental standards.
Absolutely. Our ASAP program, and you know, we were on your show a few months ago talking about that, and so the ASAP program, Agriculture Stewardship Assurance Program, and you know, I think it will do three things. Number one, and the reason we started this program was to champion the good things that Missouri producers are doing across all segments: livestock, crop, forestry, specialty crops. Again, things that we've learned, new technologies, you know, no-till, cover crops, the things that are contributing to controlling soil erosion and improving water quality on the crop side, and even on the grassland side, on the livestock side. Lots of new advancements in the forestry, in managing forests. How do you do that and keep the soil there, prevent erosion, and have a healthy forest? So number one was to champion the good things that we're doing. Number two offers us, I think, a vehicle for communication to people outside the industry, outside of agriculture, that don't really understand a lot about what we're doing. Offers us an opportunity to tell the good story about the good things that are going on in agriculture. And you know, if you pay very much attention to a lot of our retailers, not only here domestically, but certainly with our export partners, there's a desire for sustainability assurances. And we know that this program will offer producers, farmers in all segments, opportunities to get into markets that are requiring sustainability certifications.
This really seems like, to me, in my lifetime, has become kind of a disconnect between the consumers that we're trying to feed and trying to serve with food and fiber, and the farmer. And as we have adopted new technology, that scares a lot of folks, and that seems to be a disconnect that we didn't used to have.
You know, you're exactly right, and I will tell you that when I first started in farming, my first crop was in 1983. We went about our business and assumed that everybody was on board with it, and I think most people were. But as you say, just lots and lots of technical advancements that have benefited, frankly. I think it goes to food security. It goes to continuing to be better at producing a safe, abundant food supply. We were kind of still in that mindset until maybe 10 years ago, and we kind of woke up one day and we said, gosh, there's some people that maybe are questioning some of the things we're doing. And so a lot of groups, commodity organizations and farm organizations, the Department of Agriculture, really started to take a look at how do we communicate that good message about what we're doing, or how do we communicate the message, period. And some methods of that communication have been effective, and some, frankly, have not. And so we've still got a big job ahead of us to talk about what we're doing on farms. Back to my first crop in 1983. When we just kind of put our head down, we did our work. We've got to be more transparent in agriculture. There's a lot of people now in Missouri that are inviting folks out to their farm, letting them have a firsthand look at what they're doing. Sometimes we've got to be a little careful with some of these animal agriculture interests because of biosecurity and those kind of things, making sure we keep the animals healthy. But a lot of people are opening up the farm gate and letting folks in and take a look and to see what we're doing on our farms.
And that's really, that's become true, especially in some of like the wine operations. We had a show recently with the grape and wine program. Some of the farmers market programs, people are invited out to the farm,
Sure.
want to do some picking and see
Sure.
exactly how things are grown.
We've had groups at our farm. We actually had a television station from Kansas City that came up fastened GoPro cameras on the combines, and spent 3 or 4 hours with us. And the folks that came up were really surprised at some of the technology, kind of how we do our job. And we're just like thousands of other farmers in Missouri. I mean, we don't do anything really extraordinary. We just go about our business. But we've got to continue to do more of that.
But I know you're the department and commodity groups and others that have joined together. Got some real strong initiatives in the St. Louis area to try to get people more acquainted with how their food is grown.
Right. So a couple of things we're doing. This will be our first year for a program we're calling Life Sciences Quest. And we know agriculture in Missouri is the #1 industry. And if we're going to continue to hold that position, we're going to have to continue to foster interest and ignite passion in young people to be that next generation of leadership, be the next generation of researchers or communicators or whatever the case is. And we do a pretty decent job with outreach with our students in more of our rural communities. But we don't do a very good job reaching out into our urban areas. This year, the Life Sciences Quest will be a week-long program at the University of Missouri where we're recruiting students from St. Louis, Kansas City, a few from Columbia, to come in and basically have a quick immersion into what is the science of agriculture. You know, these students may have an eye on a career in medicine. They may have an eye on a career, in engineering. Well, you could have those same careers and be in agriculture. And so we hope that opens their eyes just a little bit. Last year in September was our very first activity called Scape. And Scape was basically, we are opening up the farm to people in St. Louis to come out, take a look at what we do. We had live animals, we had crops there, we had a lot of farmers just talking to people that walked through, and in person, folks that actually attended the event, and folks that we reached on social media. We reached over 225,000 people with a good, solid, positive message about agriculture, and didn't shy away from things. We talked about biotechnology. We talked about vaccines in animals. We talked about a lot of things, and I think the people that we were able to engage with came away with a lot better understanding. And it was at Busch Stadium. At the Ballpark Village, just right outside Busch Stadium. So a great location, and we saw that as a success, and we're doing it again this September.
Doing it again this fall.
Yes.
And then the Science Center in St. Louis has got a project that's going to be starting up soon.
They do. Project Grow. I actually had the opportunity to be over there last night for the kind of the VIP opening, the sneak preview, and so. Couple of things. They're looking at agriculture from the science perspective, and secondly, it was supported. The fundraising, the effort to get this moving forward was supported by so many groups in Missouri, whether it was the Farm Bureau, the commodity organizations. A lot of people came together to support it because it's needed. Over 1 million visitors every year in the St. Louis Science Center. And so we hope that certainly bears fruit as well.
When our kids were young, that was one of our favorite places. Tried to go a couple of times a year. A lot of fun things.
It is.
St. Louis is itself, I think of as kind of an eastern city in so many ways, but it's very much an agriculturally based city as well.
Absolutely. The St. Louis Agribusiness Club did a study 2 years ago and took surrounding the St. Louis area and surrounding counties and looked at the value of agriculture in that region. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it is enormous, the amount of agriculture when you think about food processing and grain handling and Monsanto, the Danforth Plant Science Center, Syngenta, those companies that are housed there. It's really agriculture is a significant driver in the St. Louis area, as well as the Kansas City area.
Well, and for all of the state of Missouri. Let's talk a little bit. You just finished a legislative session. Mm-hmm. Anything big that came out for or against your department?
I think we had a pretty successful legislative session. From a legislation standpoint, we kind of held our own. Nothing terribly beneficial, but nothing that was detrimental either. I think that means that agriculture is in a pretty good place. There's not a huge need for some big initiative, and there's not a whole bunch of people knocking at our door either. from a budget standpoint, the General Assembly was very kind. Some of these programs that we've just talked about
cost money and people.
They cost money, they cost people, and it takes people. But the legislature saw the value in that, and the budget is on the governor's desk. The governor is the chief executive of the state, and while we advocate for agriculture and the things that are needed for agriculture, there are also lots of other needs in the state, as you very well know. So we'll see how the budget ultimately shakes out, but we were very happy with the end of the legislative session.
I know one of the fun parts of your job, no doubt, is representing Missouri around the world, really, not just around the country, but around the world. And you've gotten to do some traveling recently that is hoping to open up some opportunities for Missouri.
Yeah, the governor is very serious about trade, and he has a statement that governors don't go where things are not happening. So we went about 2 months ago. We went to Panama, and we wanted to get a firsthand look. And why it's so important to Missouri, we want to get a firsthand look at the Panama Canal and the expansion. So with two rivers, blessed with two great natural resources, the Mississippi to the east and obviously the Missouri that cuts through the middle, we wanted to see what the impact of the expansion of the canal would do on, and primarily, at least near term, primarily on agriculture shipping. And so one of the things that we learned was the freight rates that would be assessed on barge traffic or commodity grain leaving ports in Missouri will be reduced, and it moves that draw line. So the draw line is what the market, how it will draw it to the east or to the Mississippi. That draw line comes almost all the way across Missouri with the reduced freight rates, because you're gonna put larger ships through a larger canal in Panama. Kyle, one of the things that I brought home with me, I'd been to Panama a couple of other times, but just the reminder that the canal system that they're using today was built in 1917. The gates are still the same gates that Americans built in 1917, and they're still using those today. Obviously, the expansion is going to be kind of a new design. Much larger ships will go through there, but they're still going to use the old canal as well.
Yeah, and that's going to improve our markets. But we've got a need for infrastructure here on our Mississippi River. It needs some modernization. It's been a project that's been needed for many years.
It really has. And when you think about moving goods, here in the Midwest, and that's kind of what we talk about a lot. The last major infrastructure program was the interstate system. We haven't done a lot with our ports. Rail, it was desegregated a long time ago. And so, the rail advancements have been done with private money. And so we need to make some investment in our ports. The folks up and down the river will tell you that. They've been saying that for 20 years. So I don't know. I think we need to start looking at, the public-private partnerships, and because I'm not sure that the government can fund those to the level they need to anymore.
You also got to visit Cuba, and it's fascinating to me to watch what has happened from the time I was young, and we were bitter enemies and about to go to war over Cuba, to now it looks like, I've told my sons that they will be visiting Cuba recreationally in the not too distant future. That's also going to make a big difference from an agricultural perspective.
It really is, and really I think there's a couple of things that need to be brought up. One is Cuba right now is importing a little over $2 billion in food and food products annually. And none of that's coming from the U.S. There may be a smidgen, very small amount, but primarily it's coming from other countries. Cuba is a country that's 90 miles off our coast, and a population of 11 million people, so it's not a huge market, but it is a market, and it's a market that could really be, I think, accessed by a lot of products in Missouri. And again, we talked about the rivers, the Mississippi, Missouri, Mississippi. That positions us in a very good way to service that market. I think first off, maybe Southeast Missouri farmers and the rice producers down there may be the first ones, that have a consistent market in there. But you can look across the board: feed, poultry meat, pork meat, beef, biodiesel, ethanol. A lot of things could certainly travel to Cuba right out of Missouri. But secondly, I think it kind of sends a message, maybe more of a symbolic message, to the neighboring countries of that region of the world, that America's serious about working with their neighbors, and that could open up additional markets in some of those neighboring countries as well.
I see a lot of issues on the horizon that are very troubling, but in so many ways, we are more one world today than we've ever been, and that trade is going to be flowing back and forth. Sometimes that creates some problems for us, but generally speaking, it's a pretty good deal for agriculture.
It really is. And, I know there's some concern about, from a sanitary, phytosanitary, some of those restrictions, but we have agreements with over 150 countries. I got to think that we could certainly reach an agreement with trade with Cuba as it relates to biosecurity measures and those kind of things. So I'm very positive that something will happen. The other thing too is trade is a two-way street. So obviously, as you mentioned, we'll get goods from Cuba as well. But I think there's a benefit to the Cuban people. They are literally in a time warp. Mm-hmm. They're 60 years behind us in a lot of cases, and so for us to be able to inject some new technology, some new even from the agriculture perspective, new ways to grow crops. I mean, I'm confident based on what I've seen the 2 times I've been down there. I'm confident that we could double their corn yields in a year. Triple them in 3 years. I think there's just that chance.
I wish this 30 minutes has gone really fast. I wish we had more time because there's so much to talk about. I appreciate your service to Missouri agriculture, and I appreciate you coming tonight to be with us. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Before we go, we'd like to thank you, our viewers, for tuning in to Show Me Ag, and tune in again next time for another look at a topic touching rural Missouri. For everyone here at CAMWest and myself, good night. We're also very interested in what you have to say. So if you have feedback you'd like to share with us, you can email us at showmeag@camos.org or find us on Facebook.